There are rules you're taught. Then there are the quiet rules, unspoken, unwritten, but felt the moment you step into a room, the kind of rules that shape how people see you before you even say a word. Most people don't realize it, but every time you speak in public, every gesture, every reaction, you're revealing something. You're either commanding the space or slowly giving it away. And the harsh truth? It's not what you show that defines you. It's what you choose not to show. The Stoics understood this deeply. They trained themselves to be still in chaos, silent in noise, unreadable in conflict, not to hide weakness, but to embody strength that doesn't need approval. In a world where everyone overshares, overreacts, and overspeaks, the real power is in restraint, in knowing that composure, not volume, creates presence. Today, we're diving into the 9 things you should never do in public if you want to protect your energy, hold your frame, and move through life with quiet confidence. If you've ever walked away from a situation and thought, "I gave away too much," or "Why did I let that get to me?" this is for you. And if you're someone who's on a path of growth, not noise, not ego, but real self-mastery, then consider subscribing for your own good, because every step you take to strengthen your mind and sharpen your presence brings you closer to the person you're meant to become. Let's begin. 1. Don't complain out loud. Ever noticed how the people who seem the calmest in public often command the most respect? It's not just because they dress well or speak with confidence. It's deeper than that. It's something in their energy, quiet, composed, unmoved by whatever storm is swirling around them. They don't overshare. They don't broadcast their burdens. And one of the biggest things they don't do, complain out loud. Now, that might sound a little harsh at first. After all, we're human. We all get frustrated, tired, overwhelmed. And sure, venting can feel like release, like you're just keeping it real. But in public, that release costs you more than you realize. It tells the world, "I'm overwhelmed, and I want you to carry it with me." Even if you don't say those words directly, that's the message beneath every complaint. And people, they pick up on it. Even if they smile, even if they nod along, something shifts. You're no longer the one who's grounded. You become the one who's leaking. The Stoics had a word for this kind of behavior, pathos or destructive emotion. They weren't saying you shouldn't feel. They were saying that emotions, especially painful ones, should be processed internally, not sprayed across every room we walk into. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what public restraint is about, not bottling up, but mastering your inner world enough that you no longer need to perform your pain for others. Because here's the truth, complaining may gain you sympathy, but it will never gain you respect. And if you're trying to live with intention, trying to build a reputation that lasts longer than a moment of frustration, that respect is worth protecting. There's also a deeper layer to this. When you complain publicly, you train yourself to look outward for relief. You teach your mind that discomfort must be witnessed to be real. But real strength? The kind that builds resilience? It comes from being able to sit with discomfort silently, understanding it, even honoring it, without needing to advertise it. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Complaining is often just that, an avoidance, a distraction from the deeper conversation happening inside us. And when we air our frustrations too easily, we rob ourselves of the chance to listen to what they're really trying to teach us. Now, I'm not saying you should never talk about your struggles, but there's a difference between vulnerability shared with intention and complaining that's reactive and careless. When you're sitting with someone you trust, in a space of reflection or healing, that's different. That's sacred. But when you're in public, surrounded by people who aren't invested in your growth, what does venting really do? Who does it serve? Most of the time it just creates noise. It dilutes your presence. It makes you forget who you are. Public complaining makes you smaller in people's eyes, not because you're weak, but because you gave away your composure. And composure, in a world addicted to reaction, is rare. It's magnetic. Think about the people you admire, the ones who seem to move through life with quiet authority. They aren't perfect, they're not emotionless, but they have a kind of presence that doesn't get shaken easily. That's not a personality trait, that's discipline, that's self-awareness. That's what Stoicism teaches, to control the self, not the world, to choose how you respond, especially when things don't go your way. Because complaining is a response, and it's often the easiest one. What takes effort is to pause, to breathe, to say, "This is hard, but I'll carry it without collapsing in front of others." That's powerful. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Complaining, on the other hand, signals that you've forgotten your why, that you're being pulled into the surface-level reaction, not rooted in purpose. And when you lose sight of your why, it's easy to slip into victimhood, to start narrating your life from a place of lack. Public complaints feed that loop. They convince your brain that you're always under attack, always stuck. And that mindset, it doesn't just shape how others see you, it shapes how you see you. So, what do you do instead? You endure privately. You let your silence build weight. You walk into a room with a calm so steady, people feel it before you even speak. When chaos hits, you don't flinch. You don't narrate it out loud. You contain it. You alchemize it. And eventually, people begin to wonder, how do they stay so steady? What do they know that I don't? That's the mystery. That's the power. And you earn it not by being louder, but by being stiller. 2. Don't expose your insecurities. Have you ever caught yourself saying something like, "I'm probably going to mess this up," or "I'm not the best at this, sorry," right before doing something in front of others? It seems small, harmless even, like you're just being honest or trying to manage expectations. But what's really happening in those moments is something much deeper. Without realizing it, you're shaping how others see you, and worse, how you see yourself. Every time we speak our insecurities out loud in public, we're not just expressing doubt. We're building a narrative, brick by brick, that says, "I don't trust myself, and maybe you shouldn't either." And the more we do it, the more we start to believe that narrative as truth. There's a line from Epictetus that says, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" It's the kind of dry humor Stoics were known for, but it speaks volumes. The idea here is, don't rush to defend or diminish yourself. Hold your ground. Because when you declare your flaws before anyone even notices them, you rob yourself of the power of presence. The kind of presence that says, "I know who I am, and I don't need your permission to be here." The truth is, everyone has insecurities. Everyone. Even the people who look completely put together have doubts swirling beneath the surface. The difference is, some people carry theirs silently, while others hand them out like flyers on the street. But here's the thing. When you speak your insecurity aloud, especially in public, you give it life. You invite people to measure you by that one moment of self-doubt. And not everyone watching is kind. Some will remember your words and use them as the lens through which they view everything you do from that point on. Not because they're cruel, but because people are naturally influenced by what you tell them about yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you voice your insecurities without thinking, what you're doing is letting your unconscious fears lead the way. You're reacting, not reflecting, and in doing so, you surrender your sense of direction to passing emotion. Stoicism teaches the opposite. It teaches us to observe our emotions without being controlled by them, to choose our responses with intention. So if insecurity comes up, and it will, the question becomes, do you broadcast it, or do you contain it long enough to learn from it? Let's be clear. This isn't about pretending to be perfect. It's not about faking confidence or putting on a mask. It's about owning your space, even when you don't have all the answers. It's about speaking and acting from a place of quiet strength rather than visible doubt. There's something powerful about someone who doesn't flinch when they're uncertain. Someone who can say, let's figure it out, instead of, I probably can't do this. That kind of mindset doesn't just shift how people see you. It changes how you walk through the world. There's a quiet confidence in restraint, a kind of dignity that shows up when you hold your worries close instead of spilling them everywhere. And that restraint isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. It's you choosing not to hand your emotional state over to strangers. In public, especially, your words carry weight. So protect them, protect your energy. Not everything you feel needs to be spoken. Not every fear needs to be shared. And yes, there will be moments when you're tempted to let the insecurity slip out. Maybe as a joke, maybe as a humble brag, maybe as a shield. But pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what do I want to build right now? Connection or credibility? Sometimes we think self-deprecation will make us more likable, but more often than not, it makes us more forgettable. People don't remember what you did. They remember how you made them feel. And if you walk into a room already apologizing for who you are, you're not giving them a chance to feel inspired by your presence. There's real strength in showing up with the mindset, I'm still learning, but I belong here. That's not arrogance, that's self-respect, that's ownership. And when you carry yourself like that, people respond, not because you convinced them, but because you made it easy for them to believe in you. When you hold your insecurities in private and walk in public with poise, you become someone others can anchor to, not someone they need to fix or reassure. That's leadership. That's clarity. That's the Stoic path. 3. Don't announce your plans. Have you ever felt that surge of excitement after coming up with a new idea, a goal, or a plan, and the first thing you want to do is tell someone? It feels good, right? You imagine their reaction, their encouragement, maybe even their admiration. You haven't even started the journey yet, but just saying it out loud makes it feel like progress. That's where most people get stuck. We mistake talking about the dream for actually doing the work. We confuse being seen for being in motion. But here's the truth. Telling people your plans doesn't move you forward. It just makes you vulnerable to doubt, distraction, and unnecessary pressure. In fact, it gives others a clear view of what you're building, and not everyone watching wants you to succeed. From a Stoic point of view, this is the exact kind of emotional impulse you have to keep in check. Epictetus reminded us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, while you're building something real, others might not understand or even notice. And that's not just okay, that's necessary. The Stoics believed deeply in action over appearance. They weren't concerned with applause. They were concerned with integrity, with doing the work quietly and thoroughly, whether or not anyone was watching. That kind of inner commitment doesn't need a stage. It just needs a direction. There's also a psychological angle here. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." When we constantly talk about our goals to others, we end up outsourcing our motivation. We make our vision dependent on their reaction instead of our own clarity. And when that applause doesn't come, or worse, when we face skepticism or subtle doubt, it plants seeds in our mind. Suddenly, we're questioning our ability, our timing, our worth. Not because our plan is wrong, but because we handed it to the wrong audience too early. It's not about hiding, it's about protecting what's still growing. Think of your goals like seeds. You don't dig them up and show them to people every few days to prove they're real. You plant them. You water them. You let the roots do their work underground quietly, and when the time is right, the results speak for themselves. That's what builds credibility, not declarations, not promises, but consistent, quiet progress. You don't need to explain what you're building when people can see it. And let's not forget, once your plans are out in the open, they become targets. Not everyone around you is rooting for your growth. Some people carry envy quietly. Some carry fear. Some are so committed to their own stagnation that your movement threatens them. Announcing your next big step gives them time to prepare resistance, whether through criticism, competition, or quiet sabotage. Why give them the map? Let them find out when it's too late to interfere. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach. A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." That's the spirit behind silent progress. Not needing validation, not craving permission, just walking your path with focus, building brick by brick while the world sleeps on you. And when they finally look up, they won't just hear about your vision, they'll stand inside it. There's something magnetic about people who move in silence. They don't oversell, they don't perform, they don't drop hints to impress others. They just work, they build, and eventually, when the time is right, they arrive with something undeniable. You can feel it in how they carry themselves, calm, focused, unbothered. That kind of energy doesn't ask for attention, it commands it. Not because it shouts, but because it shows. In a culture obsessed with status updates and life announcements, silence becomes power. Not because you're hiding, but because you're holding, you're anchoring, you're letting your actions develop depth before putting them on display. And ironically, that quiet discipline is what makes people take you seriously. They don't see a performance, they see patience, and patience, especially in today's fast-moving, attention-hungry world, is rare, it's respected. 4. Don't pick sides in petty drama. It's easy to get pulled into other people's chaos. Someone throws a verbal jab, someone else fires back, and suddenly the energy in the room shifts. You can feel the tension rising, and before you even realize it, someone looks at you. They want your support, your validation, your allegiance. And in that moment, the pressure kicks in. Do I back them up? Do I speak out? Do I take a stand? But here's what most people miss. Getting involved in petty drama might feel like loyalty, but it's often just emotional gambling. You might win one person's approval, sure, but what you don't see is the quiet damage that happens in the background. Others are watching, judging, recalculating how they see you, and many of them will quietly walk away without ever saying a word. Stoicism teaches us that it's not our job to react to every disruption around us. Marcus Aurelius said, "You always own the option of having no opinion. That doesn't mean you don't care. It means you value your peace more than proving a point. You understand that energy is finite, and giving it to arguments that don't concern your purpose is like pouring water into a sieve." The Stoic doesn't run from conflict, but they choose it wisely. Not every disagreement deserves your name attached to it. Not every clash needs your flag planted in the middle. When you jump into petty fights, You're not just speaking, you're signaling. You're showing people what rattles you, what moves you, and most dangerously, what divides your loyalty. And if you do it in public, the effects last even longer. It's like writing your emotional reaction on a wall for everyone to interpret. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." In other words, when something triggers us deeply, it's worth asking, is this really about them or something unresolved in me? Sometimes the fight we want to enter has nothing to do with principle and everything to do with unexamined emotion. There's strength in stillness, in watching, not reacting. When someone else is caught in a spiral of frustration or offense, you don't have to match their intensity to show you care. You can remain calm and still be loyal. You can choose to observe and still be present. The key is knowing your role. Imagine you're in an arena. They're throwing punches in the ring. You're not the referee. You're not the opponent. You're up in the stands, drinking water, memorizing every move, because you understand something powerful. Information is leverage, and emotional control is a weapon. Seneca wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence. When you hold your tongue while everyone else is shouting, you stand out, not because you're passive, but because you're poised." People begin to notice that you don't get dragged into the noise. They start to trust your judgment, and more importantly, they start to think twice before trying to manipulate your attention, because you're not predictable. You're not reactive, you're deliberate. That doesn't mean you'll never take a side, but you wait until it matters, until your involvement would bring clarity, not clutter, until your voice would create resolution, not more division. When you speak after observing, your words carry weight. They're not fueled by emotion, they're shaped by understanding. That's the Stoic way. You're not above people. You're just not inside every storm that passes by. You've learned to let them pass, to watch the clouds without running into the rain just to prove you have an umbrella. And here's the thing. Some people will not like your neutrality. They'll mistake your stillness for weakness. They'll say you're avoiding or that you don't care. But the truth is, you're choosing. You're choosing peace over performance, depth over distraction. And that choice creates space for insight, for calm, for power. Because when the dust settles, people will remember who stayed grounded, who didn't jump into the mud just to feel involved. When someone brings drama to your door, you don't have to invite it in. You don't have to match the volume or pick a team just to feel needed. You can listen, you can assess, and you can stay silent. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not respond. And here's the most unexpected part. Over time, your refusal to participate in petty drama doesn't make you irrelevant. It makes you trusted. People begin to see you as the one who doesn't flinch, who doesn't fold, who doesn't waste time on low-stakes battles. You become a steady force. And in a world where most people are tossed around by their emotions, that steadiness becomes magnetic. It's not just admired, it's respected. 5. Don't chase attention. There's a quiet power in the person who doesn't need the room to notice them. You've seen them. They walk into a space and say very little, but somehow everyone feels their presence. They don't chase eyes, they don't speak over others, and they certainly don't try to dominate the moment. They're just there, grounded. While others reach, they remain still. And strangely, that stillness pulls people in, because something about not needing attention ends up commanding it. That's not coincidence. It's the natural gravity of self-possession. And the truth is, the harder you try to be seen, the more invisible you become. People can sense when you're reaching. They may laugh, they may smile, but deep down, something doesn't land right, because the energy feels off. It feels like performance instead of presence. The Stoics believed that dignity was found in self-control, not spectacle. Epictetus said, "If you seek truth, you will not seek victory by dishonest means." And attention, if it's chaste, often becomes just that, dishonest. Not because you're lying, but because you're not moving from your center. You're bending yourself into what you think will be liked, applauded, or accepted. And that's not power. That's dependency. When your self-worth is tied to how much noise you can make, you become fragile. Because the moment people stop clapping, you don't know who you are. There's something psychologically draining about constantly trying to impress. It wears you down, even when it works. Carl Jung once noted, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you can't become that person if you're constantly performing for approval. The more you contort yourself for attention, the further you drift from authenticity. And when you lose touch with authenticity, it's not just others who sense it. You feel it too. You leave a gathering feeling empty, like you gave everything and still weren't really seen. That's the curse of chasing validation. It gives just enough to keep you hooked, but never enough to make you whole. Now, this doesn't mean you should shrink or silence yourself. It's not about being passive. It's about being intentional. There's a huge difference between expressing yourself naturally and trying to dominate the spotlight. The person who speaks when they have something to say, not just something to prove, carries a different weight. Their words stick. Their presence lingers because they're not trying to win the moment. They're simply being who they are. And that kind of consistency builds respect. Not immediately, maybe, but steadily. Over time, people begin to look to you, not because you asked for it, but because you earned it. Seneca once said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." The subtext is clear. Choose your circles wisely. If the people around you reward noise over depth, you'll eventually start performing just to keep up. But if you surround yourself with people who value calm, truth, and substance, you'll feel no pressure to compete for attention. You'll speak when it matters. You'll listen more. And ironically, you'll be noticed more because you'll be rare. In a culture that rewards volume and speed, slowness and stillness have become magnetic. When everyone else is pushing to be the loudest, the most impressive, the most remembered, your job is to become the most real. Be the one who doesn't need constant validation, the one who knows they're valuable whether or not anyone claps. And that's not always easy. We're wired to seek approval. It feels good to be liked, to be acknowledged. But the deeper work is learning to be respected, and that starts with not chasing the crowd, but holding your center. The Stoics weren't flashy. They didn't walk into the forums trying to steal attention. They walked in with purpose, with calm, and with an inner strength that didn't need to be shouted to be felt. That's what modern strength looks like too. You don't need to be the loudest. You need to be the one people turn to when the room gets noisy. You need to be the anchor when others are drifting. And anchors don't move fast. They don't shout. They hold. When you stop chasing attention, something shifts. Your energy gets lighter. Your relationships get clearer. You stop wondering what others think and start noticing how you feel. That space creates peace. And from that peace, presence grows. Real presence, the kind that people remember not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. And when attention comes, it feels different. You didn't beg for it. You didn't twist yourself to earn it. It found you because you were worth noticing all along. 6. Don't crack under pressure. Pressure doesn't announce itself with sirens. It shows up in everyday moments, when someone interrupts you mid-sentence, when your idea is dismissed in a meeting, when a stranger cuts you off in traffic, or when someone challenges your character in front of others. And in those moments, something shifts inside. Your heart beats faster, your breath shortens, and before you can think, your body starts to betray you. A flinch, a sigh, a subtle tightening in your voice. The shift might be small, but it's powerful, because what most people don't realize is this: pressure doesn't have to break you to reveal you. It just has to expose you. And most of us, without knowing it, give ourselves away through the smallest leaks. The Stoics taught that control begins where emotion ends. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." What he meant is simple. It's not what happens to you that creates pressure. It's how you interpret it. And in moments of tension, we either become the calm in the storm, or we become part of the storm. But staying calm doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. It means you own them. You don't let your face twitch, your voice shake, or your posture fold just because things aren't going your way. That's not about being robotic. It's about being anchored. Carl Jung once said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness." The same goes for pressure. You don't become strong by avoiding it. You become strong by moving through it without losing yourself in the process. And the way to do that is by mastering your energy, your expression, and your response. The world is watching, not just for what you say, but for what you reveal in silence. A tense expression can say more than a full sentence. A shift in body language can speak louder than your defense. People don't always judge your logic. They judge your composure. Now, it's tempting to respond quickly when challenged, to explain, to justify, to match the other person's energy. But the moment you match their panic, you give up the frame. You confirm the pressure. You let them steer your behavior. The Stoics believed that strength is best shown in restraint, not in being passive, but in choosing to respond, not react. You see, people don't just hear what you say, they feel your vibe. If your energy shifts every time someone challenges you, then people won't follow your words, they'll follow your flinches. That's why the person who remains calm under stress becomes magnetic. Not because they dominate the room with volume, but because their stillness becomes a mirror. Others start to notice their own emotional chaos reflected back at them. And suddenly the calm person holds the power, not by force, but by presence. It's hard to rattle someone who doesn't respond to provocation. And once people realize they can't shake you, they start to adjust around you. But this takes practice. It's not a performance you put on when things go wrong. It's a discipline you build before the pressure shows up. It starts with breath, with posture, with learning how to pause, not to stall, but to choose your next move with clarity. When someone challenges you, instead of tightening up or pushing back, breathe slower. Let the moment pass through you instead of gripping onto it. You're not ignoring what's happening, you're just refusing to be ruled by it. 7. Don't over-explain yourself. It's a familiar feeling. Someone questions your decision, your behavior, your tone, and before you can stop yourself, you're already halfway into an explanation. You start breaking it down, justifying, clarifying, hoping that if you just say it right, they'll understand. They'll see your intention. They'll agree. But here's the thing. The more you explain, the more it sounds like you're not sure of yourself. The more words you throw at them, the more power you hand over. Suddenly, it's no longer about your decision. It's about their interpretation of it. You've lost the frame. You're no longer leading the moment. You're reacting to it. And people can feel that shift, even if they don't say anything. Confidence leaks. Doubt enters the room, and just like that, you've made your truth negotiable. The Stoics would remind us that not everything requires a defense. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." His point was simple: act with clarity. then move on. If you know your motives are clean and your decision is rooted in principle or logic, why dilute that strength with over-explanation? People who are centered don't rush to prove themselves. They understand that not everyone is going to understand them, and that's okay. What matters is not convincing the room. What matters is staying grounded in your own reasoning. Carl Jung once said, "The healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers." Often, the ones pressing you for an explanation aren't looking for clarity. They're looking for control. They want to make you second-guess yourself so they can feel more certain about their own worldview. That pressure to explain can come dressed up as concern or curiosity, but underneath it, there's usually a subtle attempt to shake your foundation. And if your first instinct is to explain, then you've already stepped into their frame. Now you're performing for them instead of standing in your truth. There's power in restraint. When someone pushes you to explain yourself and you simply respond with, "That's just how I chose to do it," or even a calm shrug, you maintain the frame. You communicate that you're not afraid of being misunderstood. And strangely, that calm refusal to over-justify makes people lean in. They want to know more. They replay the moment. They wonder what you're thinking. Because mystery is magnetic. The more you hold, the more others are drawn in. You don't need to give them a full map of your reasoning. You just need to walk your path like you know exactly where you're going. Seneca said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In this context, that means don't mirror the energy of someone trying to rattle you. If they come at you with rapid questions, accusations, or disbelief, don't meet them with panic. Don't try to out-talk their doubt. That just puts you in a loop where you're reacting to their every move. Instead, slow down. Stay composed. Let your stillness be the thing they have to wrestle with. When you stop trying to be understood, you force others to confront their own assumptions. And often, that's far more impactful than any explanation you could offer. Of course, there are moments when communication matters, when clarity is needed. But that's different from defending your every move like you're on trial. The difference is intention. Are you sharing because it brings understanding, or because you're afraid of judgment? Are you offering insight, or trying to win approval? Most people don't realize how often they explain themselves just to feel safe, to avoid the discomfort of being misunderstood. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Being misunderstood isn't a threat. It's part of being human, and trying to control how others see you is a game you'll never win. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That includes changing how we react to pressure, how we respond when someone tries to challenge our choices. Instead of scrambling to explain, we can learn to pause, to trust that who we are and what we stand for doesn't need to be defended every time it's questioned. That kind of internal stability doesn't just protect your peace, it transforms how others treat you. You don't have to explain your whole story to everyone who asks. You don't have to unpack your every move for public approval. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is the one you don't say. The calm reply, the shrug, the silence that says, "I'm good with my choice whether or not you get it." That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. That's the Stoic way. Let others chase clarity. You hold the line. 8. Don't show bitterness toward rejection. Rejection doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's a quiet moment, a message left unanswered, an invite that never came, a door that quietly closes while no one's looking. And no matter how mature or grounded we try to be, it stings. Not because we need approval, but because deep down, we all want to be seen, chosen, valued. That's human. But what matters most isn't the rejection itself. It's what you do next. Do you let it harden you? Do you let it twist into bitterness and sarcasm? Or do you rise, steady and unshaken, choosing grace over reaction? The truth is, the way we respond to being overlooked says more about us than the rejection ever could. When you respond with coldness or pettiness, it may feel like power in the moment. But what you're really doing is confirming your hurt. You're signaling, "This got to me." And that gives the other person or the situation power it doesn't deserve. The Stoics were clear about this. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." He wasn't denying that rejection hurts. He was reminding us that pain becomes suffering when we hold on to it, replay it, or perform it for others to see. Carl Jung offered a similar insight from a psychological perspective when he said, "What you resist persists." That bitterness we try to hide. It shows up anyway, in our tone, our posture, our words. It leaks out when we talk about people who ignored us, or when we pretend we don't care but keep bringing it up. The more we resist the feeling, the more power it has over us. But if we can meet rejection with quiet detachment, we take that power back, not by pretending we don't feel anything, but by choosing not to perform it, by allowing ourselves to process it privately and then move forward with intention. There's a certain strength in the person who can be overlooked and still walk with dignity, not to prove a point, not to manipulate the narrative, but because they genuinely believe that rejection isn't the end of their story. It's just a redirection, a clearing. When someone doesn't choose you, whether in friendship, opportunity, or love, they're not defining your value. They're just revealing their preferences, and that has more to do with them than it does with you. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." That applies to attention and validation too. Craving recognition, chasing closure, or trying to make someone regret rejecting you. That's scarcity, that's clinging. But when you let go without bitterness, when you walk away with your peace intact, you become rare. And people notice, maybe not immediately, but eventually they feel the absence of your energy. And because you didn't try to prove your worth, they start to wonder if they missed something valuable. That's the quiet power of detachment. It creates curiosity where desperation would have pushed people further away. But here's the catch. None of this works if it's just a tactic. You can't fake grace. You can't pretend to be unbothered while secretly holding on to resentment. True stillness comes from genuinely accepting that not everything or everyone is meant to be part of your path. And that's okay. In fact, it's necessary. The Stoics believed that the universe was guided by reason, that things happen as they should, and our job is to align with that flow, not resist it. Epictetus said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly." That mindset doesn't eliminate disappointment, but it makes you more resilient, more fluid, less controlled by who chooses you, and more anchored in who you've chosen to become. Rejection, when you really think about it, is just information. It tells you what's not meant for you. It clears space for what is. And often, it saves you from something that wouldn't have supported your growth. But that clarity only comes when you detach from the emotional noise, the part of you that wants to explain, to prove, to be seen. Instead, let your absence speak. Let your silence make the statement. You don't need to announce that you've moved on. Just move differently. Focus on your craft. Pour your energy into places that reciprocate. Be so grounded in your worth that the loss isn't yours, it's theirs. 9. Don't criticize those above you in public. There's a certain temptation that shows up when someone in a position of power gets it wrong, when they're careless, dishonest, or just plain out of touch. You see the cracks in their character, the inconsistency in their words, the weight of their influence being misused. And it's easy to think, someone needs to say something, maybe even, I'll be the one to call it out. Because it feels noble, courageous, like standing up to power is always the right thing. But in practice, it's more complicated. Speaking truth too early, too publicly, or too emotionally can cost more than it earns. You may be right, you may be honest, but if the room isn't ready to hear it, they won't see bravery. They'll see bitterness. And just like that, your message gets buried under the shadow of your delivery. The Stoics were no strangers to injustice. They lived in times when emperors could end lives with a gesture, when public opinion could flip overnight. And yet, they were remarkably restrained with their judgments. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In other words, don't let someone else's misuse of power push you into misusing your voice. Reacting out of ego or wounded pride only adds more noise to a space that already struggles with clarity. And public criticism, especially of someone above you, is rarely just about truth. It's about timing, leverage, and control. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." That hits hard when we want to call someone out. It reminds us to pause and look inward. Are we pointing fingers because we're centered or because we're triggered? Because when your criticism comes from a place of unresolved emotion, it doesn't matter how accurate it is. It still feels personal. And personal attacks, especially against people in power, tend to backfire. Not because the target is blameless, but because people respect composure more than confrontation. There's also the question of gain. What's the outcome you're really hoping for? A change in behavior? A shift in public awareness? A correction of injustice? Those are worthy goals, but they rarely come from a single outburst. They come from sustained clarity, from strategy, and from influence earned over time. When you criticize someone publicly, especially someone who holds more status, what you say becomes less important than how you say it. And once the audience detects bitterness or sarcasm, they stop listening to your message and start judging your character. That's the risk, not just being unheard, but being misunderstood. Waiting doesn't mean you're afraid. It means you understand the value of patience. When people are watching, when trust is fragile, and when power is on the line, what you don't say can be even more powerful than what you do. Let others burn their energy pointing fingers too early. Let them fight shadows while you gather light. And when the truth finally stands clear, when others see what you saw all along, you won't need to shout. You'll simply speak, and people will listen, because your silence gave your words weight. This isn't about being passive, it's about being precise. There's a difference. You're not avoiding the truth. You're choosing when it's most effective to speak it. The Stoics would call that discipline. Modern minds might call it emotional intelligence. Either way, it's the ability to hold fire without throwing it, to observe without becoming entangled. And that kind of composure doesn't just protect you, it earns you quiet influence. Over time, people will notice that you don't attack. You move intentionally. You don't stir drama. You study it. You don't speak to be heard. You speak to be remembered. In a world that's always pulling you to react, to prove, to perform, remember this: the strongest presence is the one that doesn't need to shout. True power is quiet. It's calm. It's deeply rooted in who you are, not in what others think of you. So protect your energy, move with intention, and let your silence carry the weight your words don't need to. If you found something in this message that spoke to you, there's more waiting. Watch one of the suggested videos on your screen. It might just be the next piece of wisdom you didn't know you needed. Thank you for being here and for being part of Stoic Journal, where strength begins within.